It's preparing to strain. So much pollen in my thighs, I start rinsing it off in the morning, you know? And John will go.
John, my apologies. I have to leave by 10:30. Just want
I hope to be done by then.
to, huh?
I hope to be done by then. Good morning. This is a subcommittee meeting of the Ways and Means Committee. On the committee is myself, John Kingston, and Anthony Caggiano, and Stacy Bronson Rizzo. In attendance also is Aisha Nogueras. There's no one on Zoom practically. I'm not
No.
putting me on. Okay. Why don't we start by saluting the flag? I think that'll be the way to.
I pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I don't know who wants to speak, Mr. Cruz or Dr. Kelly, but if you'd like to go over this one page,
Do you want
Sure.
to start with a summary from the?
Yeah, do you want to give a quick summary from last meeting?
Before we start, can I just ask a couple things? Number one is, before the budget starts. How much exactly did we carry over from the 5%? What was the exact amount? What exactly did we take from our reserves? And then we went to here, you know what I'm saying?
I do, yeah.
Because even though we're looking at a $4 million deficit, it's actually a $12 million deficit. If you think about what we took from the reserves, what was the numbers in the carryover?
So this has no money from the reserves yet. We would wait for the committee to tell us.
Right, but what I'm saying is what will be the carryover? What is the amount? And what do you think we'll be using from our reserves? And then here, you know what I mean? So everybody knows here what the entire picture is.
Mhm.
Because it looks here, we're just getting 4 million, we're cutting. But we're actually borrowing, we're using our reserves from last year as well as our district's reserves.
Mm.
Do you know what I'm saying? Just
Maybe
to-
a summary of carry forward.
just to give a more
Yeah.
realistic of
Yeah.
what, our cuts are also.
So here's the 2-minute rundown from the first conversation that we had, somewhere here, somewhere. The first working version of the budget showed a $7 million plus structural deficit between everything that was in there and what the appropriation at the time was looking to be from the city. So that's where we were starting in our last conversation.
Mhm.
That number assumed that we will see $5 million of carry forward flow from this year to next year. We're very confident about that number. It's less than it was the previous year when that number was 8. So we're already depending on 5 million of carry forward from 50-60 million dollars. So very typical. We're very confident about that. That number did not assume yet a penny of our district reserve being used.
This, what you're saying now,
The 7
plus
the
the 5
7 and
carryover.
change
Okay,
assumed the 5,
yep,
but did not assume anything yet from district reserve.
okay,
Our hopes had been, 3 months ago, that district reserve would really be the help when SOA funding shifted. But we know that we reserved it for such a time as
when
these,
we truly need it, yeah,
but it has not been figured into the bottom line as of this point.
okay.
So the 5 million is assumed. We're confident about it based on the latest projections. 0 is assumed so far from district reserve, and then that will start to come into the conversation as we go.
Well, actually, we used the 5, but it was actually 12. Now we're at 7.
That's right.
Okay.
The basic conversation in our first one was, hey, why has that happened? That was important to communicate to the school committee. Why would we be facing a $7 million and change structural deficit? So we ran through the 6 or 7 main reasons. I'll just restate them, but it's in the stuff that was sent out last time. Our net school spending increase was flat. It did not have a SOA bump that we had seen every other year recently. Our carry forward was 8 million last year, and it's in the ballpark of 5 this year. That was affecting the number. All of our collective bargaining is in place, and so we're dealing with those realities in these numbers as opposed to an estimated negotiations figure.
Mhm.
So that was affecting it.
Was our estimated negotiation figures higher or lower? I imagine that we went higher than we estimated.
Last year, we had ballparked 4%. At the end of the day, it was 375, but there were other
Factors that
things that
came in.
affected it, so we were really close with that estimate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Health insurance rates at the time of our conversation were estimated to be up by 19%. That may have crept down to 17%, but it's still 3 times the increased percent that we received in net school spending. We've spoken all year about the spike in tuitions, agency, and tutoring costs. They're now appropriately hitting the budget, which is cannibalizing so much of our non-salary side. As everyone in the room knows, the ESSER funding is truly exhausted. And that is what we have spoken about for the last 3 years. When that cliff comes, how will we manage that? But if you look, you will see it's been halved over the course of 4 fiscal years. And this year it's at 0. The charter choice figures are cannibalizing over $1 million of our net school spending increase. So the first 1.2 or $3 million of our net school spending increase is going directly to choice and charter tuitions.
And just a reminder that that increase was about 8 million this year.
Right, so of the 8 or so, 1+ of it doesn't even find its way near any of these numbers, none of them. And then the substitute costs have got to be corrected in this year's budget. And there's a variety of reasons for that needing to happen that we talked through, including the increased staff just means increased absences. The rates that we're paying to the substitutes, some things that changes in the collective bargaining around not free periods, study periods, additional maternity time given, all of that affects your substitute costs. We have to adjust that in this budget, but it's a big ticket item. So we ran through all of those reasons and saying it's no surprise to us that when you get hit with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items like that, you're going to be facing a significant structural deficit. And then from there, the administration said, okay, so we're going to work on ways to address that, which leads us into this meeting. So I think that's a summary of how we get here.
Perfect, thank you.
Any questions on that piece?
No, thank you.
So that first draft version of the budget that we looked at last meeting assumed what would it cost us to keep everything exactly the same? And that's where we identified the $7.3 million deficit. And so then 2 things start happening simultaneously. One, we are working with the city, Matt and I are working with the city on the Schedule 19 negotiation. And that's where we do some back and forth of, you know, things like, trying to think of a good example that's not transportation, trying not to say that word, but, like facilities management and upkeep, insurance of the buildings and cars, things like that. We go back and forth and negotiate. It's literally a negotiation. What percentage of that cost should the school department be giving to the city to manage our building insurance and our car insurance and all of that kind of stuff? We don't have a ton of vehicles, but we do own a number of small buses and 3 large buses that we lease. That we have to have insurance on in case something happens, and we have a handful of maintenance vehicles and things like that as well. So it does, you know, add up to a little bit of money. So we had been going back and forth with the city on that. Our goal is always to finish those negotiations in February. That obviously hasn't happened this year. We met with them on Monday and continued that conversation, and there still needs to be another conversation before that's going to be finalized. But as that one of 2 processes is happening, I'm also meeting with Danielle and Richie and Lorenzo and the principals, and we are going through and seeing where are there places that we could maybe economize. And I think one of the examples that I gave last time that I repeated on this sheet is this year we have at the Beachmont School 40 4th graders that are going to be moving up into 5th grade. We currently have 3 5th grades at the Beachmont. We don't need 3 5th fifth grades for 40 kids. So that's a position that we can look at moving that to 2 fifth grades, so there'll be 20 kids in each class, still small class size for fifth grade. And then what happens to that third position? It does not mean that one of those 3 teachers is gonna be let go. What it means is we look around and see where is there another position for that teacher, and it could be that there's a second grade teacher who's moving to California with her fiance. All right, then somebody's gonna go to second grade. And there might be a couple of flips. They might say, well, the fifth grade teacher is probably better in third grade, and then the third grade teacher can go to second grade. The principals have to have all of these
So just
conversations.
because we see a reduction in the class size doesn't mean that the teachers are gonna be out of a job.
That's correct. And it gets even more complicated than that, because it might be the case that Beachmont School doesn't have a place for that fifth grade teacher, whose position, not the teacher, we're not eliminating teachers, we're eliminating positions. So Beachmont might not have another slot for that teacher, but the Garfield might. And so then we talk about, then we have to get into longevity and who's got seniority and how we're gonna
Who's
make
gonna be the
moves
ones
that
to
way. It gets pretty complicated, but we're working on it now, and the principals really are focusing on where there is some excess that they can move directly with somebody that they know is going to be leaving. And so they're having all of those, we're having all of those conversations right now. I spoke to each one of them yesterday. There's 2 I haven't gotten to yet. Where we've been talking about, what are you thinking? What do you think the 2 positions are? How is that gonna work? And I can say to them, well, I know there's that spot over at the Remy Marsh, or, things like that. And Danielle's been helping me a lot with that, which is great.
Dr. Kelly, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So even though the classes have reduced for the fifth grade class now, what about the third and the fourth grade classes that are coming up? Are those larger sizes? Because are we gonna face the situation where by, 2 years when those kids get to fifth grade, they're gonna need a third, we're gonna need a third classroom?
So that's a great question. There are some spots where future classes are gonna be large again, and we're gonna have to think about moving. But what we can think about is if that's the third grade class now, right? One of those teachers moves up to fourth grade, and now there's an extra fourth grade section, and then that teacher moves up to fifth grade, because the classes behind could be
It'll
smaller.
be small, okay.
So we have to keep looking at it,
Adjust.
and adjusting.
And Diane, the figures here, approximately 22 teachers reduction for monetary are being absorbed elsewhere, so there's no savings. Unless you get 22 teachers who are leaving.
Yes, that's the idea, that there'll be 22 teachers who, and there's a lot of reasons why teachers might be leaving. Some of them are life
No,
choices, right?
that's, I mean,
Yeah.
to arbitrarily say 22 people we cut out, we saved $4 million. You're not, because it's just being transferred.
Correct, and we are monitoring that
Yeah.
to make sure. What we don't wanna end up in is a situation where we're quote unquote cutting people. Because we're telling people we can't hire them back, and then they're gonna be on unemployment anyway, and that's gonna be an additional cost, right? So we are
We
monitoring,
definitely don't want them to be the teachers that. They're the
Backbone.
backbone, right, exactly.
Thank you.
So we have not gone crazy with this. There are some other line items you'll see here, like the first one, clerical overtime and technology overtime. That we're just gonna say, no, we're not paying that. We're not doing things in an overtime model. The JROTC position, we do have a resignation. So that's another example of, we're just not gonna backfill. The instructional coaches, we have 3 people who have already informed us that they're moving on. So those are just positions that we won't refill.
The instructional coaches, are those, is that like math or ELA coaches, or are those the restorative justice? I know there's different types of coaches.
Exactly,
Which
yeah.
coaches are those?
So those, one of them is the deeper learning coach. One of them is a consulting teacher at the high school, and the third one is a STEM coach.
Okay, thank you.
Diane, maybe when you draw this up the next time, is put an asterisk beside those positions that are gonna be gone. I mean, just to give a better example of true savings against just moving people around. And I noticed they're all teachers. I don't see it much in the administrative end of it.
Yeah, well, in the last 4 years, we've added 115 teachers and 4 administrators. So it's
We
not,
just added 3 assistants.
Correct, and other than them, the only other administrative position we've created was the special ed executive director.
But I'm saying, but there's a $500,000 right there on those three positions that could guarantee 10 teachers.
So just a reminder that all of these positions, Fred, that we're eliminating are positions that we don't need. Like the example that I gave, 40 kids going into 3 5th grades is not at all necessary to have a class.
No,
Yeah.
I follow the logic.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying here is, it seems that the foundation is teacher is, again, and I'm ancient, from administrators that we had, now that what you had, but you deem them necessary.
Correct.
When crunch comes to crunch, one administrator can save 2 teachers. That's all I think you gotta look a little closer.
No,
at that.
and I've looked very deeply at it, and when we made those additional positions last year, it was because we were still seeing excessive numbers of chronic absenteeism, and we were still struggling in certain areas to recover. And these are jobs that those people are doing. When I look at what we've done since the beginning of SOA and ESSER, when we had more money, 90% of what we've invested in is teachers. So that's where we've completely bulked up our staff. We never went ahead and added a whole bunch of custodians or secretaries or administrators. Because we wanted to reduce class size, and one of the things that we're trying to avoid hitting here too, which has been really helpful to us in the last few years, is our intervention program. So we're not trying to cut the math interventionists and the literacy interventionists at the elementary level. We're trying to leave those in place so that kids can have the real-time interventions that they need to get back on grade level when they're not. We're really just looking at things like the example I gave of, if we have 40 kids going into 3 classrooms, that's excessive. We can have those 40 kids going into 2 classrooms, eliminate one position, you know what I mean? And then all of them are mindful, Fred, about there's somebody who that teacher can go into, so we're not eliminating the person, we're just eliminating the position.
Could you talk about the 4 special ed positions?
Thank you. Yeah, I was gonna ask.
Yeah, and I'm still working with the it's EL/special ed. And so I'm still working with Jen Labalita and Sarah Humis to identify exactly what those positions are, but I'll start with EL because that's a little bit easier. One of the things that we've seen this year is our EL enrollment stabilizing and decreasing in different schools. So we had been investing heavily in adding the number of EL teachers that we had in each school, but now that we're not seeing, and we didn't see in January, the influx that we usually see of new students, and we don't anticipate that we're gonna see that happen. In addition, we've seen a number of our EL students exit the district. And so those teaching positions, those EL teaching positions that we had added on in the last few years, as we saw those numbers climbing, we're reviewing to see if we need them all. But we're anticipating between those 2 things that there'll be 4 positions between special education and EL that we can look at to make sure that we're fully using those resources.
One of the things I wanted to ask is, do we have currently, put these cuts aside, have teacher positions that are opening, that they're vacant?
I think that we have 1 teaching position that's vacant right now.
Okay.
And we are looking at, for each scenario like that, we are looking at, is this a position that needs to be filled
Right.
or not? So let me correct that. We have 1 teaching position open right now that we think we need to fill, that we want to fill. But so like, if you look here, the 2 school psychologists.
Right.
You'll remember that over the last few years, we've added 5
Yeah.
positions.
Mhm.
We filled 3 of them. 2 are still open. We're gonna cut those out of the
Yeah.
budget. And so those aren't even actually people, they're just
Things we
open
never
positions.
filled.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that one.
The same with the school nurse position. We added a school nurse position last year. I'm sorry, Susie. And we have not filled that. That was gonna be so right now we have at least 1 nurse in each building. Our larger buildings have 2, the high school has 3. And we have a nurse who floats to cover when another nurse is absent. And we also have a part-time nurse at the Parent Information Center who handles, medical records as kids enter the district. That person has requested to come back full-time.
Thank
And,
you.
pardon me?
Thank you.
And so between that person becoming full-time, we feel like we'll be okay eliminating the second float nurse position. In effect, we'll have a, plus 0.5.
Right. Okay.
Or a minus 0.5 from what we wanted to have. So we felt like that was close enough, but overall it saved $90,000 in the budget, even after we adjust that person's salary from part-time to full-time. The health aides and benefits, you'll recall that when COVID happened, we argued that we needed an extra pair of hands in each nurse's office in case a student came down symptomatic. And you needed one person to be dealing with a symptomatic student or staff member, and another person to be separating them from the population. And so we added health aides into each nurse's office, and certainly it's beneficial to have more people in every school in every position. So the decision that we had made at that time was we would let them go by attrition. And as people chose not to continue in the health aide job, we would just eliminate it. So now we're at the point, so at that time, I think that we had 14 health aides or 15. And we're at 7 now. And although that is a nice to have, we do feel like that's a position that we can no longer afford to maintain. What we will do with these 7 individuals is see if there are other jobs in the district that they might be interested in.
Our jobs,
Say again?
Paris.
Paras, school security, they're wonderful people, and they've been, I know that they're assets to their school communities, there's no doubt about that. But we'd like to get them into positions that can be more permanent and stable. The one carpenter position is we had a retirement recently, and so, I've spoken to Carl, and we've decided to proceed without replacing that position for now.
Diane, what happened to there were talks off and on about incorporating now people with the city side, Public Works Department.
I don't feel like that conversation has gotten any traction. I know you're right. I feel like every time there's a new mayor, the conversation comes up again.
Has it come up with, the current administration or not yet?
It hasn't come up with the current administration, no. And I know that they're trying to still navigate right now. It's usually a couple years into an administration that they think, what about this? But, right now, we're still trying to figure out with a new DPW leader, director, and Carl and myself and Matt, we met the other day to just talk about understanding how the school buildings, we call them school buildings, but they're city buildings, they're city facilities. And making sure that there's a strong working relationship between the school department and the DPW to ensure that the services of the city are being rendered to the schools in those areas.
Maybe we refresh the mayor that it's their buildings. That if we cut it out of the budget, he has to eat all of it. Maybe he'll eat 25% of it or 50% of it.
I don't know that we're on that. Matt can talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes.
I'd rather keep the maintenance people and get things fixed as we need them, as opposed to trying to call the city side and say, hey, can you help us fix
No,
it?
what I'm saying is this is an expense, technically, it's theirs, but we're responsible for it. And they're all
Yeah.
relatively new buildings.
And I will say that we benefit from having an absolutely incredible maintenance team.
Oh, they're there, they dropped.
They're
Love to
exactly
change it.
right, Freddie. That's a perfect expression. They're there at a drop of a hat. The emails come furious in the morning. We are on all of them, so we see, a cafeteria manager who's emailing at 6:30 that a particular oven won't come on. And, the electrician is responding, I'll be there in 10 minutes. And, it's really beneficial to have that for the kids.
Could I just go back to
Yeah.
this? I just wanna, make sure I say this so I don't forget. I'm just looking at these teacher positions and I hear what you're saying about the types of scenarios that are behind, I'm assuming all of these potential suggested cuts. I guess my thought is that they were initially budgeted for because we saw a need for them. And so I I get that we're kind of reworking that, but if there really truly is a need for these teacher positions, then I just would request that we just take a much closer look at positions that are, you know, furthest away from students and making.
Oh,
cuts before you take.
I can tell you 1,000% that we've done that deep dive on all of these, and we've worked with the principals to do that, so. This isn't just me randomly,
Yeah, no, I believe
picking
that. I
numbers,
believe
yeah.
that. I'm just saying that we put it in there because we wanted these positions and felt that there was a true need for them. So I just want to make sure, my only, and I'm just asking that we just look at the peripherals and the people have, the positions that have been added on as, I'll just say a luxury to have.
yeah,
And before we do away with positions that we at one point really felt we needed.
right,
Teacher
no,
positions.
I 100% agree with you, and we have done that due diligence.
Okay.
And the other thing, that I'll say is that our reality has been changing in the last couple of years, and our enrollment has not been increasing the way that it was,
That's true. Yeah.
a few years back, so there are positions that we added when we were booming. I mean, I'll give you an example, this year's senior class is 600 students. Our incoming freshman class is 437. So there's a difference, there is a shift happening,
Mhm,
and so we're trying to react to that.
mhm.
And we're being responsible, like, I'm not asking anybody to eliminate a teaching position that's gonna create class size of 38
Right,
or 28 even,
right,
you know what I mean?
okay.
So we've been really careful about that, but we also, I will say, don't often take this deep dive and say, where do we have some extra? Often we just let the extra flow because things ebb and change. You don't want to be restructuring your building every single year based on a change of 4 or 5 kids
Right,
coming into a grade level. You want to have some stability there. You want the team at that grade level to continue to develop their relationships so that they're working at their best for all kids. So we do keep that in mind, but we probably don't look this carefully
as we're doing right now.
as we're doing right now.
Okay.
Except when we're in a jam like this.
Diane, what you just made reference that the freshman incoming is a third, 20-30% less. I don't see any high school teachers on this list.
There's
That's
5,
That's right, for
RHS 5 teacher positions.
Halfway
It's the,
down.
it's the last
Halfway
one, right
down.
above, DRT.
I
Anyway, the
apologize.
13th
I
one.
apologize.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
should have put line numbers
Thank
on
you.
them, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. No, thank you.
So going to the next page. We took a look at our non-salary accounts. And obviously, there's gonna be less savings here because we put a lot less into non-salary. The bulk of our budget is salary. You can look down at these. The first one I'll call to your attention is school committee, other costs and expenses. Because that directly impacts the school committee. That's a line item that doesn't often get
Used.
used.
Yeah, it just sits there, exactly.
Yeah, I don't recall
Yeah.
getting any.
And that's the same with these others, Lions Bridge, we're not eliminating, but we're reducing that budget because. Since we got Parent Square, a lot of people have been using Parent Square more frequently to communicate because it translates automatically. And you can write a message in your preferred language and then receive it. The person receiving it can receive it in their preferred language. So
Right.
we've been doing a lot more with Parent Square. And so we still want to hang on to Lions Bridge. It's still critical when you're trying to call and speak to a parent on the phone. But we felt we could reduce that a little bit. Superintendent supplies and materials, we've obliterated.
I'm sorry, how much do we budget now for Lions Bridge?
I think it's 20 and we're reducing it to 15. Is that right? No?
That sounds bad.
Yeah, it's right there, 5. Reducing it by 5,000.
Yeah. Superintendent supplies and materials, we're cutting.
How are you able to cut, the telecom and Verizon?
Matt's gonna explain that in a
Okay.
minute, but I'll just run down, just run.
Do you do the rewiring yourself, Matt?
Yeah. The district promotional materials, we had recently been budgeting so that when Laurie and Allison go to hiring fairs, they can give a pen or, some kind of a little swag to entice people. We don't anticipate we'll be doing a lot of hiring fairs this year for
Mhm.
exactly the reason we're here talking. And so we've eliminated that. And then the PIC, the business office, and then all of the schools' budgets, we've cut by 40%. And that's a combination of both their office supplies and materials and instructional supplies and materials.
Where's
So,
that on here? Oh, I
Oh,
see,
see,
I
each
see,
one
it's all,
Garfield?
yep, I got it.
so what that is every year, naturally, because principals are trying to run an organization, we give them money for their office supplies and, you know, toner, a lease on their copy machine, all of that kind of stuff. And we also give them a budget for instructional materials so that they can decide that if the third grade team wants to buy a book series and use it in their reading class, the principal has the discretion to make that decision and buy that stuff. And that's always a good thing to have, but that's one place that we're tightening. And so these numbers that you see here, if you look at Beachmont, it's 14,000, Garfield Elementary, it's 18, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those budgets that they get in those two areas are based on their enrollment. And so Beachmont has a smaller overall budget to begin with because they have fewer students than the Garfield, for example. And so what we did with those two budgets was reduce them overall by 40%. So there won't be that discretion to buy a new set of books that's not related to our English curriculum, which we already pay for. There won't be that discretion to buy that additional set of books for the third grade. And there won't be that discretion to buy teachers a Yeti cup that says Susan B. Anthony, or, you know, different things like that, that are wonderful and create community and help principals support their teachers as best they can. But those are things just like the superintendent's supply budget materials and all of that are getting cut. Those are getting cut as well. I don't know, Matt, if you want to add anything to that.
So the only thing that we would add is, this is for this year.
Mhm.
Everyone can tighten their belt for the good of the overall for a year. You know, like we had a whole new upgrade to the municipal accounting system last year. So that required some serious training and investment of 10.5 business finance staff. Well, this year I don't have to do that, so we can reduce it.
Yeah.
But in 2 years, if there's a whole nother new system, these
Right.
can bounce back up as things flow. As opposed to saying, hey, we'll just level these budgets. If you don't need them, don't use them. But this year it is, you're not even gonna have it to use it if you want.
Right.
The only big asterisk that you may hear Diana and I say multiple times throughout the next 4 weeks or 6 weeks is, don't forget that this tightening of the belt always reduces what could possibly be in the carry forward moving forward.
Right.
So just as an example, if you had left the business finance department intact, and I said, hey, we didn't have to do a big training this year because the accounting system wasn't new, that 5 or 10,000 that it would have cost me would have flowed through to be available the next year. When we do all of this, we are reducing
The carrier.
what could possibly be there. So no one on this committee should be surprised next year if in February, March, superintendent and I are saying, hey, you know, that carry forward figure that was 5, now it's only 3. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yep.
So these affect next year. They can be restored, but this is a double effect of, there are some funds here that were always discretionary. If you used them, great. If you didn't, they'd be available and flowing through.
Mhm.
This is the first time in a while. And don't forget, this is a second reckoning on the non-salary. So already in the first version that we worked through, we had gone literally line by line and said, what is not happening next year? Is this Mastery Connect existing? So this is a second economies of scale being found here. So just, you want to feel the import, not only in, oh man, right there, some of the things she just mentioned can't happen next year, it's okay. But that it was never even budgeted to begin with, which means it won't go unspent. So that's just something to keep in mind as the effects of a difficult year not only affect the year that you're in, but they have a
Echo effect.
secondary echo effect that we need to be prepared for next year.
The one other thing that I'll mention, and then I'll have Matt hit the telecom Verizon, is the RJPD. We've
Yeah,
had that in our budget for several years as we continue to grow our restorative practices program and our MTSS program. We're eliminating that from our budget this year and hoping to find a grant that might allow us to still have that training. If we can't find a grant, then we won't have the training.
There's been we've had some training over the last 5 years.
We have,
So
yeah.
at least we're not completely out of it. you know?
Correct, and because we're not gonna have a huge influx of new teachers this year, we're not as concerned about making sure that,
But a grant would be nice.
but a grant would be nice, yeah. And then you wanna hit the Verizon?
Sure. Also, don't forget on this side of the page, so. I've given 2 negatives. Now I can give a positive. If next year's net school spending has a beautiful investment of SOA and it's 11 or 14 instead of 6 or 8, then we can restore some of these. So you may sit here next year and say, why is the Lincoln School up $40,000? Well, we have to keep in mind that's because in the previous year,
We've got a budget money.
so this will be the first time that you're gonna see swings potentially in different directions over the course of budget cycles. It just hasn't been the norm on some of the non-salary side.
Mhm.
So Verizon is the one telecom that we put on here. I have to go through the actual invoices with John Ferrara and our AP who pays these bills. But John feels that a number of these lines exist, but are not essential to use. And so we have to do an audit of this. And I don't know if we'll get to 56, but there should be a substantial savings in saying, hey, that's actually a fax line. We have 3 of them. We only need 1 or 0. And so instead of $40 a month for 3, we can get that down to just $40 a month for 1. So that's the one place where there should be some telecommunications savings realized. And it falls the same as we had said before. This year, if the PO was for 70 and the charges were for 38, that unspent funds would flow through and be reappropriated next year. What we're saying here is, can we reduce that 75 to 25 and save that money in the budget? But next year, there'll be no $50,000 difference in there that flows through. So we have to do the work on that. There's probably 15 of those that you're not seeing here that
That's
we've
what I was gonna
already,
say,
we've
they're like,
already done the work
okay.
on before the first version.
okay, and that's how you're able to.
Yes, this was a tighter look at things and highlighting. There's secondary savings that could happen here. So by no means is this the only reductions in your non-salary side, which you will all see when we finally get an appropriation and I can give you a detailed first version of the budget. You'll see lots of red in the non-salary side, at least for one cycle of a fiscal year.
So that is about $400,000 in non-salary combined with the $4 million in salary brings us to 4.3. And when we take that off of the 7.3 deficit that we were looking at a couple weeks ago, it leaves us a little bit over $3 million as our new deficit. And I'm gonna put 4 caveats on that.
At least.
At least 4 caveats on that. One, and these are the additional considerations at the bottom of the page. The first is transportation. And we know that's not really relative to our budget as a school department. That's a city responsibility. We met with the mayor and Rich Risque, Monday?
First Thursday, then.
First Thursday and then Monday. And one of the things that we were quoted was we're only giving $10 million for transportation. Our current purchase order estimates and all of that, I think are 11 point. Yeah, I don't have my schedule 19 paper. Do you have that figured out?
Yeah.
So that, I think we were at
Yeah,
almost 14, wasn't it?
well, in order to operate the transportation program next year as it operates this year. When you net out reimbursements that we know are coming for special education, circuit breaker and homeless. We need $11.6 million from the city to operate it. And so, when Dr. Kelly says the conversation was in the direction of, hey, we're just giving you 10, then you can feel there's a $1.6 million difference in there. We have pleaded with the mayor to put at the top of his agenda to connect with the subcommittee of the school committee that handles transportation, to sit down and have that conversation together. So it doesn't affect the numbers we're looking at here.
It does if we have to come up with the 1.6 though, right?
Well, and that, therein lies the challenge, like, we
That
literally
the
can't
challenge.
use
Literally
net school
cannot.
spending money for transportation, it's
Cannot.
illegal. So what we would, but I don't know what the solution is, because if we just proceed based on what we know right now on transportation, it means that around the end of March or April of next year, we would be out of transportation money, and then I don't know how special needs kids get to school every day.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to spend our net school spending money on that. It's not eligible for net school spending.
Sure.
I don't know if you wanna, I don't know how else to say it, but
Yeah.
Could give a couple questions first. If we go by state law, how much would it be? And if we went without the lottery, how much is it cost saving? So.
So if we just provided the services that the
Do what
law
we get
requires
first
us
by
to.
law, first by law, and then by breakdown of lottery. What is each cost savings? That's number one.
So we have done that analysis, we've given it to the committee.
February, I think it was.
It has two segments to it, two iterations.
March.
So that.
Sorry, it was the March 18 meeting.
The savings estimated that would be incurred if we moved from the 1 mile to the 2 mile limit is in the $900,000 range,
Okay,
because it's a reduction of yellow buses that have to run.
Yeah, there's 3 yellow buses to each middle school. That we would not need to employ. If we went from the 1 mile radius to the 2 mile radius. And that comes out to a total of 952
952.
for the year.
And then the secondary question, which you said is, if there was no lottery, then the savings eventually can peak into the $300,000 range on that. But it would not be realized immediately, because you'd have to phase out the placement. You're not gonna move a 7th grader out of the school he's been in for 2 years.
Yeah.
And even if you do that, you still have
Given the context, yeah.
a substantial number of students, even if they were going to the school closest to them, they still exceed the 2 mile mark. And so the second iteration of savings is not nearly as pronounced as the first. That was the analysis.
And I also just want to add, because I know there's been talk around the city about that. We know that the lottery is not loved by anybody. But it serves a really important purpose in terms of making sure that some schools aren't overcrowded and some schools aren't undersubscribed, and some people. We know by how kids select their schools that more kids want to go to Susan B. Anthony and Rumney than want to go to the Garfield. There are kids in the Garfield and Beachmont and even Paul Revere neighborhoods who pick Garfield as their first choice. But the number is far lower than the number of kids who are picking Susan B. Anthony and Rumney and Marsh as their first choice. And part of that is a function of the west side of the city being more densely populated with school-age children than the east side of the city. And that's why the Beachmont is such a small school. We see a burst happening at the Paul Revere where we're over class size compared to when that building was built. Those fluctuations and things are gonna happen. But there are a lot of families who, I think if you said you can only go to the Garfield, would be as displeased as there are families who say, I didn't get my first choice in the lottery. Again, this year, as is true, has been true every year when we run the data analysis, this year there were 44 kids who did not get either their first or second choice. That's a really small number. And to think that we're gonna restructure how we do all of our middle school assignments because of transportation costs, to me is a little bit incongruous with what students need educationally, particularly around the class size piece. If we're just gonna say, pick your middle school and you can have it, we're gonna be in a real problem with enrollment. If we say we're gonna district the city at the middle school level, and depending on what street you live on, that's what school you're gonna go to. I still think that there'll be as many challenges as the 44 that we face right now with the lottery
And no, in that, no substantial transportation
savings. Yeah,
savings, because if you district it that way, you still end up with lots of students that have to get on a bus to get to the 2 miles.
Has there been, I'm sure there probably has, but has there been discussion as to restructuring pickups, like maybe combining stops or, you know,
we have done that, and that was actually one of the things that we were looking at too. Was the elementary runs that we do. We do a couple of elementary runs for the Paul Revere School for the students from the Point of Pines. And a couple of runs from North Revere that go to the Lincoln and the Wayland. And so one of the things that we're looking at is combining that Wayland Lincoln run into one bus. Richie, thank you, is doing the work right now with Denise to make sure that all of the kids that have transportation that way are actually qualified for transportation. Because this gets complicated too, but if they had made a non-neighborhood request to go to a different school that now enables them to get on the bus, we don't provide transportation for kids who go to non-neighborhood schools. That's on the family to provide that transportation. So we're looking into making that be one run. We think we're gonna be able to manage that so that in the morning, the bus would pick the kids up in North Revere and make a stop at the Wayland and then make a stop at the Lincoln. And so that eliminates one bus there. Denise is also, we met yesterday and I reached out to my colleagues in Chelsea and Winthrop, and we're trying to coordinate a meeting with our special education directors and our transportation directors to see if we can identify, and this gets super complicated, but because there's limits on how long kids can be on buses or whatever, but we want to look at if Winthrop has a student who's going to Landmark, and we have 2 kids going to Landmark, and Chelsea has 1. Is there a way within those timeline structures and the needs of those kids that we could have a bus pick up the student in Winthrop, pick up the 2 in
The runs,
Revere, pick up the student in Chelsea, and then make one run? And that would cost us 50%. Chelsea would pay 25 and Winthrop would pay 25, but that would be better than the current 100% that we're paying, right?
that each one is paying.
Correct, right. So we're looking, we're gonna have that meeting. We can't fix that right now, but we are gonna have that meeting and have those conversations and see if we can set up a structure where we can find those economies more readily. And then I'm trying to think, Richie, is that, I feel like I'm missing one other key idea that we had.
The elementary Pockendale bus, which is building a luxury.
Yes.
Yeah, it's,
Yes, so one of the things that was implemented a number of years ago was a bus that goes from the Lincoln and Wayland over to the, from the Wayland, Wayland over to Parkendale, you know, that area where there's a lot of housing.
just beyond Park Ave, so.
Right at the bottom of the hill.
Right at the bottom of the
The
hill.
other side of it,
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
like South Urban, but.
Yeah, we're not exactly sure when that bus was implemented, but we think it was maybe kind of a favor or there were concerns about kids crossing Park Ave. And now that Park Ave has the calming tables, so there's no more extensive speeding on Park Ave, we're gonna eliminate that bus, and that's about $300,000 there.
Yeah. we
But
could
that's
put
not
another-
incorporated.
Put
in
another
the-
crossing guard there.
We're not including that 300.
Do you know what I mean?
Correct, or you already assume you're gonna do it.
It's crossing guards, but
The-
saying that we
the-
could put.
right
one
now,
for-
it's not.
The
too.
number assumes
Rather
no
than
change to
cheaper.
program.
Right, so these changes, so first of all, there's I think it's 317,000 for the Parkendale bus that we're going to eliminate, that's gonna happen. Other than that, we're looking into seeing, you know, what we can do in some of these other areas, like I said, can we fit all of the kids from the Wayland and the Lincoln on one bus from North Revere?
What about the push to the new parents for the incentive to take their kids and.
We
get
do
kids-
that if every.
I know we've
single
been pushing
kid.
it, are
We still are, yeah, every
Okay.
time we get a.
and we should be spreading that as well.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, and yeah, so I'll just say that right here so that people listening but will know. Is we can make agreements with parents to, if their child is. Assigned to a special needs program outside of the district. Rather than us paying for the transportation, if the parent or a family member, it doesn't have to be the parent. Has to be somebody assigned by the parent. Is available to transport that student themselves, we can give them a financial incentive to. Take care of that. Instead of us providing that transportation. And so if there are any parents out there listening who think that they might qualify for that, they should give a call. And we would absolutely work with them to reduce that cost. And so I think the big decision, the big game changer here would be, if the committee wanted to eliminate those 9 buses that are currently transporting middle school students who live more than a mile, but less than 2 miles. By law, you're only required to transport kids when they live more than 2 miles. So there's
But the
definitely,
savings is 300,000.
it's about 950.
900,000, 950.
And just one other piece of that means that a lot of, if more parents are gonna be driving their kids to school. We don't unfortunately live in a workers' community. I wish we did. But that's gonna have an impact.
And
on
how many
traffic.
students does that affect? About,
I think it's about 100 at each middle school. Maybe 120.
The only else I'll say on that is, because I know a lot of cities and towns have been cutting bus and everything. The transportation, in fairness to the city.
Yeah.
We're telling them, this is what we want. And in actuality, it is the city's money.
Yeah.
So for us to make a decision
right,
using their money might not be the fair way. It might be, the only fair way is the city has to decide, not the school committee, because we're basically saying one thing and they're saying the other thing, and it is their money.
Yeah,
So we have to be fair with them, so I would have to say the decision would be more with what the city feels about, because if we say we want this, we're gonna say we're only paying this. It's not our
That's the
decision to make,
problem,
because
yeah.
it's their money,
And
so-
one thing,
and we'll
sorry,
support whatever they do.
Yeah.
But I just feel,
well, I think that
Make a
that goes to the having another meeting with the transportation subcommittee and with the,
absolutely,
you know,
Yes.
this city. And
Yeah.
It's this group.
this group,
Yeah,
and
bus-
I mean, it's probably all of us
Ways and
back here
Means
again,
bus.
but either way. You know, come into some resolve.
Well,
Okay,
yes, Ms.
I didn't want to jump in. And he's right, it's the city's money, but it is our job to find how it will work best for our students, because they're our students, so. We have to work with that money and them trying to figure out
right, but,
all the cuts.
right, but at the end of the day, if we say we want this, and they want that, and they're only willing to pay
Oh, I would love to say, yeah, everyone have this, but
right,
we have a budget.
It's ultimately their decision to
Mhm.
make. But one thing we should think about doing too is we always have, and it's at the vote too and everything, when we go for the busing contract, only one bus company bids on everything. And you and I have had this conversation. If we get with the cities and towns, say with
Yeah, we
Chelsea,
need to,
Revere,
because they're monopolizing.
right, and just say,
There's no
yeah,
doubt. There's
but
no
if you turn
doubt.
around and say the Winthrop, Chelsea and Revere. We're putting out the bid as one,
Hmm.
and then have the bus companies bid on Winthrop, Chelsea and Revere. That might help our buying power when we're putting together negotiating as 3 towns as one bid. You might see. That might be a way to decrease our transportation.
But one company may not be able to service all 3.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
We don't know. I mean.
No, I think there's gotta be a different approach to
That's the only way.
negotiating with
Yeah.
these bus companies, because they definitely have all gotten together and,
Right.
you know,
Right.
They're
and I
calling
know
the shots,
some
there's no doubt
Cities
about
and towns try to work with NRT transportation on this. And they still monopolized everything and they still, they want to chop money because
Why not?
they had no one
Great.
else.
But even if we say 500,000 or $1 million, it's. I mean, even if we do 2 towns or instead of 3 towns, I'm just saying is. The more we have, the more buying power we have will decrease the price.
Yeah, no, that makes
And,
sense, it's smart.
So the dollar figure that the city has established is based on the 2 mile? 2 mile?
No, I
No.
think that is randomly. picked.
No.
No.
Yes, so in other words.
But they've got to at least come to the 2
In our
mile number,
conversation,
whatever that is.
in our conversations with the city, you can come at these conversations from the top or the bottom or the side. They're coming from the side and saying, I know that your numbers say 11.6,
But this is all. we
but
can
we're
do.
only giving you 10.
Yeah,
And then we say, well, you can't just say that to Diane and I, you need to sit with the school committee, subcommittee for transportation and say, hey, if all we have available is 10, how can we get from 11.6 to 10? What can change in the programs? So that's the conversation that we've pleaded would happen as soon as possible.
I knew that, but we talked about, if I mean, I didn't write it down, so that's my error. You said if we go to 2 miles, we'll save 900,000. There's still a 700, in my head, rough figure, there's still 700,000 that's
yeah,
in the
That
wind.
is
Yeah.
Correct.
So that means if
we're just talking about ways in which we could, if
no, I
we
understand,
were
but
responsible
it
for the
looks like,
1.6.
it looks like there's a
out of the
$700,000
bid.
hole, and it looks like.
No, it's a $1.6 million.
No, if we went to the 2 miles, which I don't agree with, I'm just
Right.
throwing it out there. So that's 900,000, it's still a $700,000 hole.
There is.
Wouldn't the city have to plug that hole, because they have to provide up to 2 miles? And I'm not saying we will try to help, but if we don't have the 700,000, I mean, if we cut 700,000, we're losing more teachers, it's the only way to do it.
Well,
Well, we
You can't-
can't cut teachers. This is, like, as Anthony said, this is not our money. Our money can't fund this. The city
Right.
has to fund this.
Right,
What you can do is decide what the policy is in terms of who you're gonna transport. So for instance, you could say, get rid of those buses at the middle school level. Cause we want the city to be able to meet their number that they've targeted for transportation. You can say, we agree with Diane and Richie that they should get rid of that bus that's going to Park and Dale.
right.
You
You gotta work.
know what I mean? Like, we've got,
I guess you're missing the point.
our money can't go to this.
Right, so how are we filling the gap?
Well,
How's the
that's
gap
And
getting
then you have to
filled?
work with the
Make it
city.
small.
The city,
Yeah.
the city's
What's the-
responsible.
Right, so we do everything we possibly humanly possible, just hear me out, we do everything humanly possible to get the bus number down to X. If that number X is less than Y that we're getting from the city, who's,
Well, that's why Anthony's saying, that's the point I'm getting from him, is if it's gonna come down to that, and that 1.6 is not gonna be covered, then maybe that call as to who's gonna get cut should come from city.
Yeah.
That's my understanding of what he's saying. That's where we're at,
It
like,
is-
that's why we're,
you-
but I think the effort should be made to meet with the city.
no, I see.
And to try to
what I'm
work
trying
that
explain,
out.
and
Correct, yeah, we're
It's
doing
it's not,
everything we
it's not
can.
really, I mean, with all due respect, it is our dilemma, but then it isn't. Because we
that's-
can't give them the money, we can't do that anymore, we've done that in the past.
Right, we
We've
we
given
were
them the
allowed to do
As far
that.
as I know, the last 3 years, we've given money for
That's
busing.
true.
Okay, so
And I
we
think
can't,
that-
we legally can't do that anymore, which I think, they're very bright people over there, I'm sure they get that. But I don't, again, I'm confused, because if we've done everything on our side that we can, the only other suggestion I have was to possibly have the transportation department move to the city side and let the transportation department, let that come under I mean, the city's
My
paying the
concern
bill
with
anyway.
that is that, my concern with that is that we're gonna get less services. Because that might be, once you're up there, your priorities shift. Do you know what I mean, as far as what's most important, and maybe transporting kids to school may not be as close a priority as it is for us, for them.
Yeah.
And so
I agree
I
to
would
a
be
point,
afraid
but
that there
again,
would
I
be
don't- I
additional
don't know how we're
cuts
filling the
and less
hole.
services.
I don't see it.
Yeah,
And I
and-
understand the quandary of the whole, but I don't understand how it's gonna get filled, because we can't fill it.
But you have to
Again.
meet, and that's what the conversation that you have to have, that
That's
subcommittee.
why
with the
it's a
city.
hard conversation of
Yeah.
cutting buses.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing. How many does the high school have for busing?
Oh, we've cut them significantly. We only do 2 miles or more for high school now.
And they don't need to be bused.
I think we
period.
have what? They do if they're more than 2 miles.
2 miles.
Yeah, because they're
More.
kids getting off
That's
the bus
all we're
on
doing is
Broadway,
more
I
than 2
see them.
miles. Yeah,
They're getting off the public bus,
yeah.
on Broadway,
there should very soon be
very
a
soon.
request to the school committees, subcommittee for transportation to meet with the city side, most likely the mayor and his director of finance, to have the conversation that John was just citing.
Yeah,
Who's the chair of that,
Of what?
of the transportation? Is that under, building and
It's ways
maintenance?
and means.
Oh, it's Ways and Means?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Transportation,
Yeah, transportation.
it's always built
I
in.
guess we should put it over.
Oh,
took
I'm
it
sorry, I
over.
apologize.
But then going back to what John was saying, is if we reduce it technically, then you don't have to meet 1.5 million, it's only 400,000.
It's, the city wouldn't have to meet it, so we'd be reducing it to assist them with their,
Right,
with their.
but we're looking for another, where the city's coming, where the school department's coming up with right now, 1.5 million.
Mhm.
They're giving 10 and it's 11.5. So if we reduce a bus or that 1.5 million comes down to like
Mhm.
400,000. So that all we have to do is find a way to offset 400,000. So
And-
you're
and-
not too far off, John.
I agree, but I would add, it's the city who has to
Yeah,
find the
it's not-
four.
No, I'm saying,
Yeah.
but this,
No, the 1.6.
So, but what Fred and John are both saying is if we figure out ways based on what you vote for, how you want to structure transportation in the city, and that pulls the cost down by, let's even say that it's 1.2, I think that's reasonable. I think that we can do that without, if the committee were to say, get rid of middle school buses, I think that's a huge thing to think about, but
Mhm.
if you decided to do that, and then we add the other Park and Dale bus, we're at 1.2, right? So now there's 400 left in the middle.
The city might,
There's literally nothing legally that we could do to come up with that 400,000. We cannot give them school department funds from net school spending.
Mhm.
We can't not transport kids who live more than 2 miles from school. We can't not transport kids to their out placements, or if they're homeless, to their home district, or, all of those things that we have to do. We're required by law the city is required by law to transport those kids.
Another conversation has to happen.
so. Obviously, if they know we're working hard to cut that down to meet their 100. There's a possibility that they may say, okay, they did everything possible, let's give
Yeah,
them the
that's
extra
what-
four.
Well, I did by law, they have. to.
Right.
Well,
Right, but and that's what Matt and I said to the mayor, like, these are decisions that need to be made by the school committee with the mayor as their chair in consultation with his city manager or city finance director and the city council, like, getting rid of, the middle school buses. That one of the things that I see in Riviera that's unique compared to a lot of other cities and towns of our size is that we really are entrenched in highways.
Mhm.
And, so if I think of the elementary kids who are being bused from Point of Pines, do we want them walking down? Is it Route 1A,
not sure.
I'm sure.
North Shore Road?
Mhm.
Do you want 5, 6, 7-year-olds walking down North Shore Road every morning? I don't know. But that is a decision that the school committee, with support from the city council and the mayor can make.
But the point is, it doesn't really matter what we decide.
Yeah.
It's their money.
the end of the
So
day.
that's how, I mean, I agree with you. I wouldn't want to do less than 1 mile. But it's not our money to spend.
Yeah, there's gotta be a meeting of the minds. There's
Right,
gotta be
then we
some
can't-
middle
You
ground.
gotta-
Yeah.
It's gotta be.
The financial crunch that we've just spent all of this time talking about here is being felt at the city. It's being felt at the
Right,
state. It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Everybody's
I
making
think,
these
I think
difficult
Stone
decisions.
stopped busting that road.
Yeah.
They're doing it.
Diane, do communities still charge athletic fees and transportation fees?
Yes, some communities do
Even
charge
does.
us.
Even
athletic-
charges for buses, but I don't know
Yeah.
if that's gonna work either.
Now, you just said that Stoneham has canceled all busing? Tony?
They
Hmm?
talked
You
about
say
it.
Stoneham has canceled?
I was told that Stoneham did,
Away with transportation, I thought so, I read that.
Linfield doesn't have it, I'm sure there's other communities, Everett doesn't have
Everett doesn't.
transportation.
Never
You know,
did.
it may come, push comes to shove.
But we also have a different setup, like Diane was saying. Everett is a walk-in city. There aren't
Right.
major roads that
And we
kids
have
are really
highways.
crossing. You have Route 60, but there's no real houses on the left side of that. They're all, you know what I mean, this side. Chelsea Ave, that's not a major street. Broadway, I mean, there's really not much in Everett. Winthrop, forget about it.
I'm worried about.
Well,
attendance on
Winthrop
a rainy
doesn't
day.
transport because they're so small.
Right, that's what I'm
There's no one
saying.
who lives
But
2
that's what I'm
miles.
saying.
Their
It's a different setup.
transportation is around special needs kids being
We have
outplaced. Yeah.
highways intersecting
Well,
the city at
You're gonna
every,
walk 2 miles in the rain to go to school.
no, I get it.
Well,
John, I get
yeah,
it. I'm
too
not,
bad.
no, I don't want
I don't feel too
a
bad,
6-year-old
sorry.
walking 2 miles at all. No.
No, I mean, I went to Everett, I walked in the rain, snow and everything,
And look at you
And-
now.
and look
Yeah,
at me
but-
now, I survived, no wonder.
I know,
am
the horse and
way I
buggies would go
am.
by and
That can an
slash
argument
you.
both ways.
Yeah.
Rishi,
Just another quick example to, Aisha's point. Another bus that we're looking at is Warden McCoba down in the PJ's area, going up to Lincoln and
Yeah.
Salem. The problem is Squire Road. I mean, that's, you know, we've been talking about the city about potentially putting a crossing guard there.
Yep.
I mean, so just, we're considering everything, but to your point, there are some dangerous roads sometimes in the area.
Oh, no doubt.
I mean, look at all the students that we have coming from off of Shirley
Sure.
Ave that have to go Bell Circle,
Yeah.
who has a harder
Yeah.
walk than those
No kidding.
students?
No kidding.
so
God
just,
bless them.
I know we're up on time and Stacy has a limit, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of other things. One of the things that we learned from the city on Monday is that they're recalculating how they assign or distribute the cost of different kinds of insurance, like building insurance, auto insurance, all of that kind of stuff, in such a way that it's gonna cost the school district, was it 260,000 additional dollars, Matt?
Ballpark, yes.
So that, and that's again, part of our Schedule 19 conversation and negotiation that we're having with City Hall. It's tough because we're already doing everything that we can to minimize our budget,
Hey, excuse me, you're gonna pass on to us insurance on the buildings?
correct?
They're buildings,
It-
and
It's
they
a-
want us to insure them.
It's a qualifying city cost, which means it does count toward net school spending, the 5,000 series. So then they have a pretty big calculus on square footage, number of vehicles, and cost increases like everything else. So since the last time that we looked at that number several years ago,
Mhm.
it's up from the high 400s to the high 600s. But again, if you called around to all our peers and you talked to their CFO, like I just spoke yesterday, I think it was to Peabody, and said, can you tell me what this looks like for you? And he said, yep, our chargeback is 740. So because the square footage in these buildings is bigger than the square footage in the other places, there's that cost allocations. None of it is incorrect.
Or illegal, or
It's just
Again,
something that they've been covering.
it feels like
so-
anotody squeeze.
Right, but
when
they're
in
being squeezed, so they
yeah.
have to squeeze.
Yeah.
us.
Right
I
now,
get it.
right now, who pays, when they go out to bid for their city trucks and we go for our school buses? We go out for bids and they go out to bids, it could be two different carriers?
No, not for insurance.
Okay, so
So the
that's,
entire fleet of the city is
okay,
on a
fleet,
single
okay, they do
insurance
have
policy.
fleet rate, okay.
So it makes sense that we have a very small portion of those costs, because we don't have
Yeah.
police
Big car,
cars
okay,
and fire
right,
engines.
So let me just clarify a little bit. So with the buildings, they actually calculated what percentage of the municipal buildings are part of the school department and what are not. And that's where they said 80%, and they have the actual
Yeah,
calculations
okay,
done.
no, it's just-
So 80% of that would come to us. And then with the vehicle insurance, it's the opposite. So the vehicles, 80% of the vehicles belong to the city, to the DPW, to the police department, the fire
Yeah,
department.
that's what.
all of that.
Fleet
And
rate,
yeah, we
fleet
have,
rate.
we have very few, so we're only like 20% of
Yeah.
that. Overall insurance
I
cost
mean,
is
it's a
being,
real, it's a real expense.
it is a real
Yeah.
expense. Yeah, it's just like, how are you broken teeth? Here's another one.
Yeah, Yeah.
The drum that we beat, that the school committee has a good grip on. But part of doing this is restating the most essential things is that the reason it's such a sting to us is because the city funds us at the minimum
Yeah, right.
Possible.
Yeah.
amount.
I see.
So if you had eavesdropped in my conversation with the CFO in Peabody, when he said to me, oh, that number is totally in line with what we do, we're in the 700s. He says, why? And then he says, oh, we don't even really look at it because the city funds us well above net school spending.
Mm.
So because they're getting $3, $4, $5 million
Over.
over, then he's not gonna.
Feel it.
Go over, yeah.
Whereas with us, because we are, it's a choice the city is making to fund us at the net minimum.
Has
That,
that always been the case?
yes,
Okay,
Well, I can remember.
but when you spend time with with your CFO and CEO, it stings. Because one more dollar is taken out of flesh, not taken out of surplus.
Sure.
So we don't have an attitude about it, but it's important to understand the numbers are solid, but there's this other reality for us. That every time a qualifying cost goes up, it's not coming out of some surplus
Extra.
that we go, hey, some years we get a lot of it, some years you get more of
Right,
it.
we're right at minimum.
Yes, so we feel that pain in a different way.
Mm.
One question, do we get any reimbursement at all?
From the insurance?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I mean, and can I just throw this out there too, for the transportation meeting that's gonna happen, if by chance I'm not there, can somebody mention that I believe there's money on the table that we could be applying for in the form of whatever it's grants or reimbursements that we're probably not taking advantage of? Not us, I'm saying if it's the city that would have to do that, if you could throw that out there as well.
I'm aware of some reimbursement programs if you electrify your fleet.
Oh,
And
okay.
we've looked into that. Because we only own 3 buses, we actually referred it to Haley to see if they wanted to benefit on that. We said that we would sign on with them as a municipality, because you need a municipality to be co-signer on the grant, and they declined to apply for it. So
Yeah.
I'd like for them to look into
Yeah.
it and make sure that we're not leaving any money on the table that could
Yeah.
be rectifying the situation.
And then just 2 other quick things that are also gonna see a little fluctuation in the budget. One is, as you all know, and I wanna thank Aisha and John for their work on this.
Yeah.
We've had a salary working group that reviewed all of our non-union salaries to make sure they're in alignment. Turns out that was relatively timely. I didn't know this, but the state just released a new law saying that they're
Yeah.
gonna be investigating equity in salaries. And this is actually gonna help us that we did this work, because when we get audited, we won't. We'll be like, here's all our work, we just did it all, so that's really great. But there were a handful of people who, based on the work of that salary working group, are gonna see positive adjustments up in their salary. And so that's gonna have a little bit of an impact. It's not huge.
Yeah.
One of the things that the working group wanted to make more uniform was there were some non-salary, non-union employees who were receiving longevity benefits based on various different contracts,
Mhm.
and there were others who were not.
Mhm.
That's inequitable.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we're going to correct, and right size that. And I'll have a more comprehensive description, and I'm gonna have, actually, we put together a sheet that categorizes different non-union employees based on what their roles and responsibilities are, and put like a base salary starting range. That should serve the school committee well going forward, because it kind of sets a model for how you can hire people and what range you can hire them in, and it'll just eliminate some of that, did that person get that salary because they know somebody, or
That's how.
Yeah.
it
And
kinda
and
started.
eventually there'll be a uniform, there'll be a clear
Sure.
pattern.
correct, exactly, yeah, there'll be a clear pattern, it'll be
Not
clear that
being wrong.
everybody gets longevity, that's one of the decisions that was made, and different pieces like that. And then, the last piece is we need to have one more meeting, I think, we'll be wrapped up in one more meeting. When we, signed the contract with the teachers, we agreed that we would spend this year revisiting athletic and extracurricular stipends. Danielle and I have been doing that work with the team from the RTA, and we're just about done. I don't think it's gonna have actually a major impact on the budget, because what we can do is just say, here's what your budget is. We've increased them a little bit, so that everybody has some opportunity, but then the principals can work within that budget and say, we're gonna run these particular clubs or those particular clubs. And as we've been doing for the last few years, at least at the secondary level, the principals are surveying the kids and saying, what clubs do you wanna see? So that will still happen, but so you'll see, and I'll share this as soon as we have it done, hopefully by the May meeting, what the new rates are. For each of the different tiers in the contract, both for athletics and for extracurriculars. We'll look at that, we're not anticipating cuts in those budget items, I'll just put it that way. So we should be able to fairly close to level services in extracurricular and athletics.
Okay.
And that's good. But that's it for me.
Yes.
Okay,
So, Fred, if you can get on the horn.
We did ask the mayor to schedule, to work to schedule a subcommittee with the transportation as soon as possible, so that can get ironed out.
What I'll be able to do now is to take both the changes that are happening on the Schedule 19 side as we inch closer to an actual appropriation. And also affect these into the living budget. I'm gonna find some ways to do it that's very visually clear. Because, we don't know who are the two teachers who will resign or retire. But we'll know that there'll be two less, so I'll work on the detail for that so that it's clear. And that will get me closer to, and really, if. The maintenance side of the Schedule 19 can be hashed out this week. We should end this week. Again, we've been pressing as hard as we can. With an appropriation, or at least a finished Schedule 19 agreement. That these numbers won't just be guesses anymore. In working budget 3.0, we'll say. This is a very solid spot where we are, and we'll see where it is, so. I'll be doing all of that work this week, and it will move as Schedule 19 solidifies itself in there too. And we'll see how close we got to that bottom line.
How many coaches do we have that are core curriculum type coaches, like coaches other than math and ELA? I think we have like 13 total coaches, right?
We have, let me think for a minute, we have 11, we have 10 math coaches, so the
Math
curriculum
coach-
coaches is split between City Lab
That's right.
and the high school. Those are
Yeah.
the ones she had. Every other school has their own math coach and literacy coach.
And then what are the other coaches, the types of coaches?
So then in addition to them, we have the restorative practices coach. We have the deeper learning coach, what'd you say?
Mindfulness.
The mindfulness coach. We've got district-wide, they're split 3 EL coaches. We've got district-wide 3 special ed coaches.
With EL.
We have the 1 STEM coach at the high school, that's
That's
the
the
one's
one,
going
yeah,
away.
yeah.
Civics. There's 1 civics coach who does all of the middle schools and the 2 high schools. That's primarily because of the new graduation requirements around civics. And then, 4 consulting teachers, 1 at the lower elementary, 1 at the upper
Consulting
elementary, 1
teachers.
at middle, 1 at high school.
Okay.
motion to adjourn.
Somebody second it?
Anyone like to be the